Welcome to the Facing Our Demons podcast.
We aim to educate
And entertain.
while talking all things demonology and demonolatry.
Come for the demons, stay for the dad jokes.
This podcast is not intended for children or the easily offended.
Although no offense is ever intended.
So pull up a chair and join us as we spend a few minutes
Facing our demons. Alright, everybody, welcome back to the Facing Our Demons podcast. This is episode number 4. Can't thank you enough for joining us. My name is Jay Thomas. I'm your layman, audience proxy, blah, 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 co-host, and my co-host, BJ Hamblin.
Howdy, y'all.
And I think we're just going to move right into it, right? Absolutely. So we're going to go with, ready? Here comes the news! Alright, if you've stayed with us through this far, you realize we usually say demonolatry in the news. Oddly enough, not always a lot of hot topics directly related to demonolatry. So we're working on renaming this segment. For now, just know that it will be at least spirituality related, or in some way tangentially relevant to demonolators of some form or fashion. So without further disclaiming, there we go. I sound so intelligible on this thing.
It's well played.
All right.
To those demonolators that are interested in Native and Mesoamerican spirits, this next news piece is affectionately dedicated. So, the Supreme Court recently ruled that half of the state of Oklahoma is the province of 5 different Native American tribes. This is in contradiction to reality for the past very large span of time where the state of Oklahoma has claimed jurisdiction over this vast area. This is the Supreme Court hearing an argument that a man who was convicted of rape on Native American territory could not have been prosecuted by the state of Oklahoma because they have no jurisdiction over this territory, according to a treaty from 1866 that was never factually upheld by the state of Oklahoma. The difference here is that now it is confirmed by the Supreme Court that treaties made between the federal government of the United States of America and Native American tribes does in fact hold weight, versus the reality of the situation where they were given the smallest, most useless scraps and expected to be grateful for any kind of continued existence. Now, in stark contradiction to that rule of law and fact, is going to be the rule of law in law, where treaties between the two are actually upheld. Now, while Native American religion isn't going to suddenly become just like the Christian religion in law, which we're still trying to figure out how much room there is for any kind of religion in law, Abrahamic or non, this is a sign, a symbol that even if your religion is based, even if your spiritual interactions are grounded in a religion that heretofore has been very limited and oppressed and withheld, you have a sign here that Meso and Native American religion can actually compete with Catholicism and Protestantism in the public space.
Okay, so if nothing else, it's a matter of
inclusion in the large public space that's being
inclusion.
crafted.
That's another good word I might have used there. Yeah.
So now we'll have Decalogues or 10 Commandment statues, and then we'll have Baphomets from the Satanic Temple, and then we'll have something for the Native Americans, because we're talking about it and it's real again. Right.
It's becoming a like you said, recognition, inclusion, and while what we're talking about here is largely territorial ownership and you know, who owns the actual land.
Criminal jurisdiction
going into the legalese and whatnot. It all not to use the trickle down term, but it trickles down to where, okay, we recognize we screwed up. Here's this. So it's, you know, it's an oppressed or having been done wrong
religious minority,
even though this wasn't necessarily a religious issue in and of itself. it still
validates the larger culture, including
right. That's
said
what I was
religion.
looking for. Yeah, the cultural inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Cool beans.
Yeah. So I know, for instance, there's a man named Solomon A.D. on Facebook who's doing a lot of good work with Mesoamerican spirits, and I can think of a few other demonolators off the top of my hat that are really into this, and I hope it gives them some more oomph, some more personal feeling moving forward, that they're engaged in something that's worth looking after, because I've been loving their input, and it's wildly interesting, and I'm glad to see it moving into the public sphere.
All right.
So in Iraq, there has been a ritual site of the Mesopotamian war god discovered.
It's always the Mesopotamians.
You
Now,
know?
I appreciate you not repeating my joke again, because I mean that's my joke.
It is. Respect.
But I am noticing they do keep coming up.
Isn't it weird? Right?
There is no baseboard spray that's going to keep these guys out of the fucking house.
There isn't. No, man.
It's not going to happen. I mean, hey, much love all around. I'm just saying,
Listen, they talk about how cockroaches will survive the nuclear apocalypse. Mesopotamians have survived being forgotten. Take that.
Well,
what does a bug have
the
against that?
Mesopotamians are just laughing at the cockroaches.
No, it's been the last 100 years that we've even rediscovered how to read these things. They've forgotten utterly from history, gone. And here they are, crawling out of the woodwork.
Every fucking time. Yeah, okay. Back to the subject at hand.
There's this ritual site for the Mesopotamian war god. Ningirsu, the Mesopotamian god of war.
Did you just drop the N-bomb?
Ningirsu comes up every now and then. It's just going to happen. You spray the boards, but Ningirsu.
Enough with the boards.
So, this entire city that's 5,000 years old was discovered in Iraq, which means in 3000 BCE, a city dedicated to the Mesopotamian war god Ningirsu was created right there in Iraq. And the thing is, it wasn't just the male deity Ningirsu, but Nanshi, the goddess associated with water, marshlands, and aquatic birds. She also had ritual items found at this place. So
water, marshlands, and aquatic birds.
And the god of war.
And also the god of war.
Yeah. So
she's rolling in with a headdress of flamingo feathers.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's the Beauty and the Beast in one 5,000-year-old abandoned Iraqi
the
city.
more I visualize it, the hotter it gets. Better move on.
It's the Mesopotamians. So, speaking on that front, I know and this is something I've been looking into recently, so I've got a non-profit religious organization dedicated to the worship of demons, right?
I was not aware of that.
We might mention that once or twice in the next, preceding episodes, but anyway, this organization, neither here nor there, there's other organizations in more or less this same vein that are also popping up around the place, and I wanted to use the podcast here for a bit of name dropping, but there's the Order of the Rod and Ring, is a Mesopotamian polytheistic reconstructionist group that I've been talking to the guy that runs it. Really entertaining, awesome guy. A lot of my research in Abrahamic demonolatry has led us into the same little reading circles, and I
also a marital aid shop somewhere, I'm sure.
The ring and the rod, but in Mesopotamian ideology, those two items were associated with religious kingship. So it's a pretty serious group dedicated to pretty serious things that not many people are talking about. In the same vein, there's the the Temple of Our Lady of the Abyss out of Georgia. Is
this the state of Georgia or the country of Georgia?
The state, not the country. Good question. So they're resurrecting a worship in the feminine divine through the spirit of Babylon, who's familiar from Revelations, the Whore of Babylon. This is a powerful figure of feminine divinity that goes back and forth and sideways in a bunch of different religious endeavors, and the work that they're doing as a non-profit religious organization is amazing, and it's good to see even the old Mesopotamian gods and all of these various demonic and terrestrial spirits actually getting some official oversight.
Yeah, nice to see him get some play.
Yeah, a little Renaissance and religious organization there.
Very nice, very nice.
But that's pretty much it, man, Jay. That's the news.
That's the news? All right. All right, so moving on to our next segment, we are calling this one Walking the Paths, where we're going to discuss one or two distinctive paths of demonolatry. And as always, take it away, Beach.
Yeah. So demonolatry is really unique, like we touched on in the first episode, because it's not something where we have a singular one thing that everyone has to do. There's no one way of demonolatry. So in this vein, I thought we'd point out some of the individual paths that are already pretty well established in demonolatry right now. Traditional and generational demonolatry is something I'd like to touch on. It's what actually brought me into the field. Was one of the authors, S. Connolly, done a bunch of good work, published all kinds of work in the field of demonolatry. Pretty much everyone here has run across her in some shape, form, or fashion, and while we might not all subscribe to her path, it is one of the big ones in demonolatry as far as adherence goes.
So what are some of the major tenets that set it apart?
Traditional and generational demonolatry, Connolly has been given access to generational magical books from groups that have been practicing this going down the centuries. And through these first ever printed revelations from these groups, things like demonic ends have come about, which is a system of chants in an unknown language that represent and calls upon various demonic spirits. It's another manner of connecting with them, like sigils, for instance. Traditional and generational demonolatry is called that because there are people involved in this who have been involved in it through their families for their lives and going back down through their families' lives. And then there's people just coming into it, and they would be approaching it from a traditional aspect, getting into the worship of generational demonolatry.
All right, cool.
Her books were really good when I first started reading into the idea of just focusing on worshiping spirits. Some of S. Connolly's works were the first ones I came across and read in PDF formats online. Still need to go back actually and pay real money for actual paperback copies of her fine work.
I'm sure she'd appreciate that.
Absolutely, and she deserves it because she's put in a boatload of work on this topic, and it shows through the pile of literature that you can get. Some of the people that are also administrators in the United Temple of Demonolatry are close adherents of traditional and generational demonolatry. They believe, for instance, that you can't have more than one matron and one patron demon. So in my practice, considering 5 as my primary sources of inspiration.
Yeah, 3 matrons, 2 patrons, right?
Yep, 3 matrons and 2 patrons. That's right outside the scope of, I believe they would say that I have spirit guides is, I think, the term that they use for spirits outside of the direct matron and patron, which they consider a very specific and defined relationship. And then there are other teachers that you will come across. So
kind of like you got God, the Father, and the Holy Ghost, then you got the saints.
But yeah, there's another way of looking at a hierarchy of interaction with spirits. That's a good analogy right there, actually. So that's For those interested, you can find these groups on Facebook. You can go to the first group that I got into this through, Demonolatry Worldwide, which is absolutely huge. I believe there's 10,000 something members to that group right now, all over the world as advertised, of all different persuasions and paths and understandings. And from there, you can try to find a calmer shore of demonolatry somewhere to settle into and get some discussion going. Would be my recommendation on the curve of how that interaction goes online. So that's traditional and generational demonolatry. Now, there's a great many different paths that the United Temple of Demonolatry has identified, and besides traditional and generational demonolatry, another large group of practitioners in demonolatry today would be Luciferians, which actually is a sideways step into Satanism.
Well, that's right there in the name.
A Lucifer, right? Luciferian. The big writer in that field is a man named Mark Ford. And he has created through his personal journey and sharing it as he has this group called Luciferians. And they're one way I've heard of putting it from an avowed Luciferian was they're the librarians of the left-hand path. And that's not far off. They're incredibly well read. They take a very serious and studied approach to their interaction with these spirits. And I have loved every second of talking with any one of them that I've come across. Mark Ford's a really entertaining guy. He's got videos on YouTube. So there's a few different outlets in demonolatry, right? You've got Mr. Ford, who's doing some good videos, but the production value is still increasing from him. And then you've got people like E.A. Coetting, who have poured a lot into production value and are putting out some pretty regular content.
Well, we ever want to get down and lay down with some good video, I mean, I think the software I use, I can do green screen, I can do all kinds of fun stuff.
Oh, that'd be cool.
You know, if we ever try to move into a more visual
format there. Yeah. Well, man, we have had some fun playing around with different concepts in that. It's nice that I get to do this podcast with an incredibly long-time friend.
It is fun. It's good times.
There's some serious backstory. So, there's plenty of other paths that'll bring you into and across demonolatry. Even as normal sounding path as witchcraft will often lead one into interaction with spirits, which almost by definition are going to wind up being some kind of Abrahamic demon, just because of the process of Christianization.
Right.
So that there is walking the paths today.
We have walked the paths.
Da.
We will walk more paths in the future.
Indubitably.
Okay, so moving on from walking the paths, we are now going to discuss others who have walked the paths. Dun. So now we're moving on to people in demonolatry.
That's right. This is the first segment too, and we couldn't have picked a better subject. King Solomon of the United Kingdom of Israel from the Old Testament. So, famously, Solomon's known as the builder of the first temple in Jerusalem. And there's this thing called the Testament of Solomon, which is from, 800 years after they started writing the oldest part of the Old Testament. So, 100 CE.
You don't have an exact date to give me, Beach?
I actually don't. They've worked on this really hard, but they figure it happened, around after the time Julius Caesar died. That's as close as they can really get in date on the oldest copies of this thing. So,
to Solomon?
Yep. In this book, Solomon summons a number of, in the Jewish version, demons, or in the Abrahamic version, or the Islamic version of this tale, jinn. And there's a world of difference between those two topics that I'll break into later. But the punchline is, Solomon didn't build this temple by gathering 600 people and making them drag huge stones around. Solomon supposedly built this temple by ordering 72 demons or jinn to appear before him in order and then submit to his will and then do what he told them.
Well, I was about to say, are these the jinn with the fiery eyes? But that's an Ifrit. Ifrit.
And Ifrit is, once again, a classification, category, if you will, of jinn that just happens to be more powerful than your lesser jinn. So an Ifrit is, just by definition, one of the more powerful clans of jinn.
Oh, okay, so I wasn't too far off.
No, yeah, it's right up there with all the different stories of genies, which is a translation of a translation into our culture.
Never had a friend like them.
No, right? There's 100 tons of Robin Williams that we can throw into this here in a second too. But so
I don't know. I feel weird now. Anytime I go back and all the good, great things he did, and yet I just knowing how it ended, it flavors it bad for me. It's sad.
It does, and there's much to be said about mental health, and that's something that Demonolatry could speak of at length.
Let's not derail too hard.
Oh no, not at all. But
we don't want another Lilith situation on our hands.
Man, I've got 3 weeks. How about you?
I mean, I want to keep doing it, but I don't want to keep redoing the same shit.
Over and over. It was a lot.
Dear listeners, Jay here.
Again and again.
Again and again.
We had to try. But yeah, so he gets these demons to come before him. He's got a special ring that has the power of God connected to it, and he uses this ring to make the demons submit to his will, and then he has them drag around gigantic stones until the first temple is built, and then Jewish history proceeds for the next few hundred years. Really impressive stuff. And the Bible, that's not exactly how that story goes. It's not mentioned. In the Quran, it is mentioned directly.
I would say, I would imagine not, if not heavily reflavored.
Yeah, no, they wound up between Judaism and Christianity, both of them put that book on the cutting room floor, the Testament of Solomon. But it did wind up working its way into the Quran. Not in full, but in part. And the flavor gets across, if absolutely nothing else. But there's a lot of fun things between Islam and Christianity that makes the idea of saying Abrahamic kind of silly. One of them is jinn and angels. In Islam, angels don't have free will. The Malaka are instruments. They're servants of God in the most literal fashion. They have absolutely no free will of their own. But jinn were created next out of smokeless fire. And they're of all different persuasions. There's evil jinn, there's good Muslim jinn, there's in the middle atheist jinn. There's a whole world of jinn hidden from our eyes right here beside us on earth, according to Islam. And that's really interesting because they can't have fallen angels. They've got to have something else. What do they have? Bad jinn.
Bad gin.
Bad gin.
I've never had good gin. It all tastes like nail polish remover.
So, at first that aftershave heavy kind of flavor really got me too. But man, once you fall into it, you really fall into it hard.
I'll tell you what though, eventually though I did get into a gin and tonic with a good lime.
Yeah. That's good stuff. So the trees around here, fun fact, they call those cedar trees, eastern red cedar. They're not. They're juniper trees, which we just happen to colloquially refer to as cedars. So cedars of Lebanon should more accurately, for taxonomical
junipers
purposes.
Of Lebanon?
Yes, it should be the junipers of Lebanon.
That's right on the sound line.
Famous local state park right there. Yeah. But Solomon engaged in all of this, and towards his death was warned twice by the Lord, come on, man, you got to be letting go of these foreign gods here. That's not going to work out for me.
I'm just imagining the big bearded man at the top of a cloud with his hand on his forehead looking down going, okay, dude, seriously, dude.
Yeah, no. And then because of Solomon's transgressions, because he had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and all of them had a god from a foreign land, that they were like, hey, Solomon, you should totally get in on this. And he was like, okay. Because of that, all of the tribes of Israel were removed from the influence of Solomon's line and the line of David, and they were left with nothing but Jerusalem and eventually the Babylonian exile, when the Mesopotamians once again crawled out of the woodwork and annihilated all Jewish defenses and took over both the upper and lower kingdoms of Israel. And So ended that.
Every inch of you is conquered from the bottom to the top. I might cut that. It's not all good stuff.
No, it's not. So it's all right.
So it's all right.
Yeah. So Solomon, man.
All right. So that is our person in Demonolatry for the week.
Absolutely.
Or for this show, because some segments don't show up every time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, are we there?
We are.
We're there?
Yeah.
All right.
Time,
this is
Jay.
the only other segment we do the drum roll for.
That's right.
Everybody get ready. Demon of the Week! Week! I don't know why I decided to
like the echo.
To improv an echo right there.
That's good shit, Jay. I like it.
Good shit. All right, buddy. Hit me.
All right, man. Our demon of the week is Atherat this week. And Atherat, man, Atherat is an incredibly old Mesopotamian goddess. So there are many different names that she went by in various different little city-state groupings of Mesopotamian cultures. But Atherat, Ashtoreth, Asherah, all of these kind of dance in the same idea, and that's of a great mother goddess. So as Atherat is already herself quite old, she goes back to that transition period between what we know of human language and the written word and what is contained entirely in the oral histories of long-dead peoples. So she's about as primal as you'll get out of the transition into Mesopotamian polytheism that led to Hebrew religion. As a matter of fact, I point that out specifically because Asherah was the wife of El, or Yahweh, and she pops up in the Tanakh, or the Old Testament, more than once. It says that you're not supposed to have an Asherah pole next to an altar of the Lord your God. It says that you're not to give food to the Queen of Heaven. There's several different areas where she's more or less directly mentioned, and when it comes down to it, the Ten Commandments was God's own divorce from his wife and their children, of which she's known to have somewhere between 70 and 88 children.
Wait. So, God was married?
God was married, absolutely, 100%.
Now, as God came before everything else, they couldn't have called it missionary.
You know, it is going to be really weird to figure out what any of that was called by them or those concerned with the specifics of their interactions.
Well, I'm concerned. I mean...
Somewhat concerning, eh? Well, it goes back to Neolithic times, so we get to literally step back into the Stone Age with our understanding of the application of what this all means. As we live inside a deeply patriarchal world, that's going to be extremely difficult.
Okay. Is that rod and that staff, baby?
It's
let me guide you into the valley.
Comfort thee, right?
Yeah, well, you know.
But still, there's this figure that stands before and beyond all of that, that gave a very real and daily power to feminine divinity. There was a point in time when Hebrews were just as concerned with the well-being of the Queen of Heaven as the King of Heaven. And then once Moses had trapezed down from the Sinai or the Horeb, whichever mountain you give more credence to, then that all
Moses
changed.
was stoned at the time.
Very possibly burning bush and all, but still have no other gods before him, can't worship idols. That's exactly how Asherah and their children existed. So this is, in a way, that story, if we think about it from a celestial perspective. Before that day, it was okay for God to have a wife and children, and after that day, there were no other gods, period. Boom. That was the big legal Henry VIII winning moment of Yahweh's existence, the Ten Commandments. And that's a side of the story that's not really considered much, And it's part of what led me to do my various researching into the Tanakh, the Old Testament, to tear it apart and extract the demonic narrative. Because, man, if that kind of gigantic underlying change in the religious ideas of all these people just gets to pass unnoticed and uncommented, then, what the fuck?
Yeah, which is unfortunate. But then again, it's funny. Sometimes, or at least in my experience recently, a lot of the more pagan paths and whatever will go the exact opposite direction. They will, fully prioritize the goddess and completely leave out the god. Now granted, that's probably reactionary, and I can understand it, but it's just interesting to me.
There are some groups that do a little better with that too. But thankfully, gender and sexual identity have been concepts that have been kicked around for quite a few years now in the public sphere, and there's been a lot of good thought poured into these things by various people that are interested in tangential subjects. And the people in charge of the Temple of Our Lady of the Abyss, what I've seen out of them so far is a habit to encapsulate the masculine in the god Pan and the feminine in the goddess Babylon. And in that way, they're still giving room for this dichotomy that we're used to, but they're not subscribing it to cisgender. So it's still open and allows for exploration from both concepts in a single person, but it doesn't hammer us into preconceived, round hole, round peg kind of roles.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I guess I was just, it's just interesting, like I said. It seems like, where I've read about that before, I think those that go to that extreme maybe come from a slightly ostracized point of view. And I don't mean that to judge or anything, but, it's like they're going from a world where it's a man's world and it's a man's this and it's blah, blah. And so to take the extreme other view, they're like, well, here's this branch of this that just cuts out the god
completely.
It's all lady all the time, and that's great if it works for them and it makes them whatever. I'm all for whatever. It's just interesting, I guess, as a reflection is all I'm saying.
It's true.
Whereas in the beginning there was blah blah blah. Sorry, I had said it in the beginning, so then I had to be epic. But yeah, there was the editorializing and the cutting out of God's wife and the feminine aspect of divinity and blah blah blah, and now some go the exact opposite way. But it's understandable why. It's just, again, to use the word for the fifth time in this last minute, it's interesting is all I'm saying.
Yeah, and
not judging in any way one way or the other.
Absolutely. Even better than that, I think, is the hope it signals for religious nonprofit organizations such as the Temple of Our Lady of the Abyss to present a gender neutral concept for the worship of the divine feminine. That's no small amount of work on the behalf of the people practicing it or the people that are founding it, and it's a really good sign to me as someone else involved in organizing religious nonprofit institutions to see that the world is open to this theistically as well as socially.
It is nice to see that slowly, ever so slowly, but it is happening, just the acceptance of everything outside, not just religion, but sexuality and identification, personal, this and that. Slowly, the world is slowly waking up, and the old people with the old hatred are slowly dying off. And I have hope.
It's going to balance out real well.
I hope that someday, and I doubt I will see it in my lifetime.
Maybe not.
But complete and total acceptance of a person for everything they are and identify as.
Absolutely.
That's the ultimate dream, and I don't know if it'll ever happen. Hell, on Star Trek, the only difference between the two people was like one guy was, they were black and white people, and the people who had their black on the left side and their white on the right hated the people that had their white on the left side and their black on the right. It was dumb, and it was their prejudice. It was a commentary on prejudice, and it's like, yay Star Trek. I'm a geek. Fuck it.
Absolutely. The original series killed it with that episode.
They
I showed
they
it off
snuck
not
in
too
a
long
lot
ago.
of good stuff. The first interracial kiss, blah blah blah. But the point is, as you were saying, it's nice to see the baby steps, though they are, acceptance coming around.
Yeah, in all of these various ways, I really dislike the general patriarchal state of things in which unfeeling men are sent into life expected to never cry and to...
Oh, toxic masculinity is totally a thing.
As soon as that dies, I'll feel a lot better for my son and just the general state of humanity moving forward. That's something I'm looking forward to seeing go away.
Yeah. Well, even in my life, I've struggled with it before I even knew there was a word for it. But I'm not going to get into great detail. But throughout my life, I've been bullied and I've returned and I've been the bully, and just because of those standards that are expected and the way they affect you and the way you feel about things and how you've responded to certain situations.
It is a cycle of pain to be masculine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and again, women have it way worse.
Absolutely.
But again, it's nice to see that they are at least acknowledging that it's not all about just man up or shut up. There's an area there.
We're human beings.
Where a man is allowed to be a human being as
Yeah.
well. So it's definitely a thing. And again, any acceptance, any widening or broadening of horizons of the general zeitgeist population of the earth is great. I wish it would happen faster.
Yep.
But the fact that it is happening at all is encouraging.
Yep. Cracks in the armor of the patriarchy. There it is. So I can't think of a much better way to pay tribute to Atherat and all of the various names and forms. I guess I could drop a couple of more fun facts in here. So in the Testament of Solomon that we referenced earlier, there is an angel by the name of Asteroth, which is an actual point in history where in this, the group of Hebrew thinkers that came up with the Testament of Solomon were able to ascribe a masculine angelic role to a feminine goddess from their forebears. And in this way they kept dragging this spirit with them as they moved forward. And then 1,000 years later, Astaroth winds up appearing in the various Goetia as a masculine demon. So Atherat herself has taken a huge journey through gender identity in Western civilization over the course of the last 5,000 years or so. So she is an excellent way for me to really consider the ancient and the modern in these masculine and feminine roles. She's been an enormous influence, and I'm really glad that I was able to bring her to wider attention with the Demon of the Week here. Ave Atherat.
Ave Atherat. I don't know why I sang that.
That's all right. I'm down.
And my dulcet tones are going to make their way in here and there.
Oh, that's right. The new Rat Pack.
That's right. Pack of one.
Absolutely.
J.
So with that, that's the end of our Demon of the Week, and thank everybody for listening. We just got our first episode released last night, or the night before, actually, for those of y'all keeping track.
Well, by the time they hear this, it's going to be a month ago. Or
I know. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Speaking to the future.
Point is that we are getting out there. You can find us on YouTube. The channel's just called Facing Our Demons, of course, with the A. Mm-hmm. We are on Spotify now. Yeah. Again, you can just search Facing Our Demons, include the A, will show up. Mm-hmm. We're also, now the home that we're at and largely disseminating from is facingourdemons.podbean.com. So you can find us there. And we're working on getting on iTunes. Apparently they like extra steps. I'm working on it.
They're doing the thing there.
We're working on getting a Facebook page up, things like that. But we're just so happy that you're joining us at all. And if you could, if you can find somebody that might be interested, hey, point them in our direction.
Yeah, we've already started getting some feedback. Our very first feedback was from a Christian youth minister friend of mine I went to high school with, who was incredibly open-minded and asked a lot of really good direct questions.
I liked
So-
that too. Yeah, he had good things to say.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, I enjoy following him and his organization's work. But if you have feedback for us, feel free to reach out there. At some point, we look forward to putting together a whole little
Oh,
segment.
I forgot to mention, of course, we're on Twitter, at FODPod, at
That's
FODPOD.
Mhm.
Try to forget it.
But,
Yeah, so that's going to do it for us, I think. And always remember. Oh,